The 47th session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay will lead the chamber in prayer.
Panginoon, ang buong bansa ay kasalukuyang nagdadalamhati sa pagkasawi ng 44 na miyembro ng Special Action Force. Napakasakit na makita ang mga pamilya ng mga bayaning ito na labis na nagdurusa dahil sa pagkawala ng kanilang minamahal sa buhay. Napakabigat ang mawalan ng isang anak, kapatid, kaibigan, asawa at ama. Nawa ay bigyan po ninyo sila ng lakas upang malampasan ang sakit at pighati na dala ng trahedyang ito. Panginoon, sa aming pagdadalamhati, amin pong idinudulog sa inyo ang paghilom ng mga malalalim na sugat sa ngalan ng kapayapaan. Dahil sa pangyayaring ito, ang Senado ay nahaharap sa mabigat na pagsubok. Naway gawin po ninyo kaming instrumento ng inyong kapayapaan. Patnubayan at bigyan po ninyo kami ng ganap na pag-unawa na siyang gagabay sa amin patungo sa pagkakasundo at pagkakaisa para sa tunay na kapayapaan sa Mindanao. Kami po ay dumudulog sa ngalan ng inyong anak na si Jesus. Amen.
Marami pong salamat, Senadora Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay. The AUP Celestial Echoes will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, after which they'll render a song entitled Tayo'y Mga Pinoy.
Happy
Thank you very much to the AUD Celestial Echoes for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem and the song entitled Tayo Mga Pinoy. Marami pong salamat. The majority leader is qualified. It's recognized. I'm sorry. The secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Onasan, Lapid, Ligarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Drilon.
16 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 46th session, 28th of January 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. The reading of the journal of session number 46, Wednesday, January 28, is hereby dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 5209 under Committee Report number 97. This is the legislative bill on postponing the SK elections, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of House Bill number 5209 on third reading is in order.
With the consent of the body, Mr. President, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary is directed to do so.
House Bill number 5209, an act postponing the Sangguniang Kabataan elections to the last Monday of October 2016, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 9164 as amended, entitled An Act Providing for Synchronized Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan Elections, amending Republic Act number 7160 as amended, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading were distributed to the members of the Senate last January 28, 2015, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading, Mr. President, and I ask for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Hunasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 5209 is hereby approved on third reading. Senator Escudero is recognized with the permission.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief explanation of my vote, Mr. President. For the record, Mr. President, I vote in favor of suspension. However, I would like to place on record for the second time around that I am voting in favor of postponement on the understanding and subject to the condition that the SK reform law will be passed before the next scheduled elections on October 2016. Nakakadalawang beses ko na pong sinasabi ito sa pangalawang postponement. Sana hindi ho umabot ng strike 3. At sabihin ko ito ulit, pag-postpone na naman natin ito bago mag-October 2016. Thank you, Mr. President.
For the record, the bill which would institute the reforms is on the floor.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, it's in the period of individual amendments.
It's on the period of individual amendments.
And for the record, Mr. President, the House leadership that met with the senators who were working on the SK reform bill also agreed with each other that we would pass this by the first quarter of 2015. So we're hoping, Mr. President, and I echo Senator Escudero's concern, that we do pass this in the soonest possible time. We don't wait for 2016 to transpire before we pass the SK reform bill.
For the record, the Speaker of the House, Speaker Belmonte, and the Majority Leader, Gonzales, committed to this to the Senate President that indeed they are committed to pass this measure as soon as possible, and that is their commitment that I place on record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
The Secretary will read the reference of business.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 1135 entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the killings of members of the Special Action Force of the Philippine National Police in Mama Zapato, Maguindanao in relation to the proposed PNP modernization program by Senator Grace Poe.
Committees on Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation.
PS Resolution number 1136 directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the police operation in Mama Zapano, Maguindanao, which resulted in the death of 44 police officers and 8 members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, and injuries to others by Senator Gingona III.
Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation.
PS Resolution number 1137 urging the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged attack of Philippine National Police in Maguindanao MLF controlled area without proper coordination with the Special Action Forces, causing the death of 44 SAF members and 12 wounded in action by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation.
Additional reference of business. Message of the House of Representatives, letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 26 January 2015 it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House number 2611 entitled An Act for an Elderly and Visually Impaired Friendly Philippine Currency Design, amending Section 53 of Republic Act number 7653.
Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
House number 4889, an act defining the maritime zones of the Republic of the Philippines.
Foreign Relations.
House number 5226, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Christian Era Broadcasting Service International Incorporated as provided under Republic Act number 7618.
Public Services.
House number 5227, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Eagle Broadcasting Corporation as provided under Republic Act number 7299.
Public Services.
House number 5285, an act mandating the provision of emergency relief and protection for children during a disaster, calamity, and other emergency situations.
Women, Family Relations, Gender Equality, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development.
House number 5299, act providing for the development and promotion of farm tourism in the Philippines.
Agriculture and Food, Tourism, Ways and Means.
And House number 5303, entitled An Act providing for a revised apprenticeship program, repealing for the purpose Chapters 1 and 2 of Title 2 of Presidential Decree number 442 as amended, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines.
Labor, Employment, Human Resources Development.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 2589. An act amending Republic Act number 9184, otherwise known as an act providing for the modernization, standardization, and regulation of the procurement activities of the government and for other purposes by Senator Gingona III.
Finance.
Senate number 2590, an act creating a system of registration and notification for sex offenders and providing a penalty for non-compliance. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Justice and Human Rights, Public Order, and Dangerous Drugs.
Senate number 2591, act providing for the proper use, handling, and storage of pepper sprays in schools. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Education, Arts and Culture, Public Order, and Dangerous Drugs.
Senate number 2592, an act to establish a national acquired bone marrow failure disease registry on acquired bone marrow failure diseases. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Health and Demography, Finance.
Senate number 2593, an act increasing penalties for employers who fail to remit SSS contributions of their employees. Amendments Republic Act number 8282 is amended, otherwise known as the Social Security Law. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Labor, Employment, Human Resources Development.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 1138 directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the firefight between government and rebel forces that left 44 police commandos dead in Maguindanao by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Unification and Reconciliation. Peace,
Yes.
Unification, and Reconciliation.
PS Resolution Number 1139, resolution directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported explosions affecting transmission towers in Mindanao by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Order, Dangerous Drugs.
PS Resolution Number 1140, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation and report that an inmate died of torture at a Manila Police District Detention Cell, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
PS Resolution Number 1141, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported controversy regarding the burial of servicemen at the Clark Veteran Cemetery, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Committees on National Defense and Security, Foreign Relations.
PS Resolution Number 1142, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recent Commission on Audit report that the Philippine Forest Corporation released 115 million pesos in pork barrel funds to 3 non-government organizations without legal basis by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public accountability of public officers and investigations.
PS Resolution Number 1143, calling on the Senate leadership to immediately constitute and convene the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on the Overseas Voting Act of 2013, and for the said Oversight Committee to require from the Commission elections submission of its report and recommendations on the other modes or systems for on-site and remote registration and elections, Senator Pimentel III.
Rules.
Communications, letters from the BSP transmitting to the Senate copies of the following certified and authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with Section 15A of RA number 7653, circular letters number CL 2014-63, 64-7, 68, dated 21-24 November 29 and 9 December 2014, circular numbers 863, 864, 865, and 866, dated 29 and 22 December 2014 and 7 January 2015, memorandum numbers M 2014-001 and 002, dated 7 January 2015.
Banks, financial institutions, and currencies.
Second additional reference of business, bills on first reading, Senate number 2594, an act instituting the Magna Carta for the Philippine National Police uniform and non-uniform personnel and for other purposes by Senator Sani Angara.
Committees on Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Ways and Means, Finance.
Senate number 2595, an act to protect and promote the right to free speech of photographers, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 2596, an act regulating the practice of employers in posting notices of termination of employment of former employees in newspapers, social media, and other public information venues by Senator Sani Angara.
Labor, Employment, Human Resources Development.
Senate number 2597, an act mandating the installation of 200 watts solar panels in public school buildings where electricity is not available by Senator Sani Angara.
Public Works, Finance.
Senate number 2598, an act prohibiting retired and incumbent officials of government from accepting employment with international and domestic creditors, Senator Ejercito Estrada.
Civil Service, Government Reorganizations.
Senate number 2599, an act amending Executive Order number 209, also known as the Family Code of the Philippines, Article 3, Senator Ejercito Estrada.
Women, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 2600, an act granting additional insurance benefits to barangay captains, providing funds for the payment of its premiums and for other purposes, Senator Ejercito Estrada.
Government Corporations, Public Enterprises, Local Government Finance.
Senate number 2601, an act amending Executive Order number 209, also known as the Family Code of the Philippines, Article 73, Senator Ejercito Estrada.
Women, Family Relations, Gender Equality, Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 2602, an act penalizing members of a law enforcement agency, other government officials, or employees who fail or refuse to testify as prosecution witnesses in any criminal proceedings and for other purposes by Senator Ejercito Estrada.
Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 2603, an act creating a fact-finding commission to be called the Mama Sapano Truth Commission with plenary powers to investigate and report upon the deaths and injuries of members of the Special Action Force Unit of the Philippine National Police in Mama Sapano, Maguindanao, introduced by Senators Ingona III, Paulo Benigno Bamakino IV, and Pimentel III.
Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, and Finance.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 1144, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that the Department of Social Welfare and Development rounded up homeless children and detain them alongside suspected criminals for the visit of Pope Francis by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Social welfare, social justice, welfare, and rural development.
PS Resolution number 1145, resolution supporting the Philippines' bid to host the 2019 FIBA Basketball World Cup and urging all stakeholders to work together and support the efforts towards the achievement of this laudable endeavor by Senator Sani Angara.
Rules. The majority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, we are in receipt of the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2400 and House Bill number 4633 on the sugarcane industry development. Copies of the report have been distributed to the senators. Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider the aforesaid Conference Committee report.
The chair of the committee on, I'm sorry, the bicameral conference committee report is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Cynthia Villar, to present the bicameral conference committee report.
Senator Villar is recognized.
Mr. President, this is the report of the Senate panel on the bicameral conference on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2400 and House Bill 4633, the Sugarcane Industry Development Act of 2015. Your Senate panel of the bicameral conference on the disagreeing provisions of the Senate Bill 2400 and House Bill 4633 is happy to report that we have come up with a reconciled version and which we are submitting today for ratification of the body. Mr. President, for the information of my colleagues, may I cite the salient points of the reconciled bill. First, the Senate version was adopted as the working draft. Number 2, Section 8, entitled Creation of Agro-Industrial Economic Zones for the Sugarcane and or sugarcane-related industries, was deleted. Number 3, on Section 11, which was renumbered as Section 10, entitled VAT Zero Rated on Refined Sugar, a new second paragraph was inserted to clarify and differentiate refined sugar and raw sugar. Number 4, on Section 12, which became Section 11, the proposed creation of a sugarcane industry development fund was deleted, with the earmarking of 15% of the VAT on sugar replaced by a mandate to the Department of Budget and Management to include in the program of expenditures an initial aggregate amount of 2 billion pesos starting the year 2016 for the sugarcane industry and to be allocated as follows: 15% for the Black Farm Program, 15% for socialized credit, 15% for research and development and capability building programs, 5% for scholarship grants, and 50% for infrastructure support programs. For this year, in case a supplemental program of expenditures will be submitted, the DBM is mandated to include the amount of 2 billion pesos and to be allocated based on the percentages previously mentioned. A new Section 12 was inserted to clarify that the proposed law will not exempt any landholding from the coverage of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program entitled Non-Exception from Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program coverage. That will be all, Mr. President. May I then move that we ratify the reconciled bill as submitted, Mr. President.
The majority leader.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2400 and House Bill number 4633 on the sugarcane industry development.
Any objection? Hearing none, the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2400 and House Bill 4633 is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator T.G. Gingona to speak on a matter of public interest.
Senator Gingona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I stand here today. As I stand here today, the families of many of our heroes, now called the Fallen 44, of the PNP Special Action Force have laid them to their final resting place. The pain must be unfathomable. I can only imagine the pain of laying down to rest one who is so young, so full of promise, and so full of hope. Mr. President, I stand here today to ask that we not let the sacrifice of these young heroes be in vain. Ililibing na natin ang ating mga bayani. Huwag pong natin pabayaan malibing ang katotohanan sa likod ng kanilang pagkamatay. Huwag po natin pabayaan malibing din ang pangarap para sa pangmatagalan at makatarungang kapayapaan para sa Mindanao. Mr. President, this is the reason for the call. And we stand here today. We make the call today for the creation by law of a truth commission. We make the call and take the stand so that the truth shall not be buried, so that the dream for a lasting and just peace in Mindanao can live on despite the nightmare that now haunts us in our national consciousness. Mr. President, our efforts to achieve that are based on one single mutual element, trust, tiwala. Tiwala sa isa't isa ng kabilang panig. Trust painstakingly built by the men and women from both sides who negotiated peace. That is the very same trust that now faces the serious peril of being buried together with the victims of that unfortunate incident in Mamasapano. My fellow Mindanaoans and I refuse to give up the hope for a lasting and just peace, Mr. President. And I believe that this just and lasting peace can be kept alive and achieved, but not without resorting to a truth commission and restoring the trust on which all these efforts have stood during the past years. But Mr. President, how can we regain and restore the trust unless we see the truth from the same perspective? How can both sides look each other in the eye once more with a clarity of conscience and motive unless every cloud of doubt and suspicion created in the Mamasapano incident has been erased? Let us have truth, and then we can rebuild trust. Mr. President, the clamor today is for truth, truth that will be uncovered by a body that is credible and, Mr. President, and independent. A body led and composed of Filipinos to whom the nation looks up to and are held in high esteem by our countrymen, and who have no personal motive nor agenda except service to the country. The clamor is for a body composed of Filipinos of known probity, sobriety, and wisdom, who can detect a lie and not let it pass, who can sense a half-truth and immediately tell the missing half, who, when faced with the truth, will know how to mine it, dissect it, and hold it against the light. These are Filipinos beholden to no one except to God, their conscience, and to the nation, and who owe no political debt from any power or authority in this land. Outstanding Filipinos who have served their country, Filipinos with the likes of former Chief Justice Hilario Davide Sr., former Senator Wigberto Tanyada, and leaders of the academe like Dean Antonio Lavinia, who hails from Mindanao. Only a body composed of such statesmen can help us find the answers to the painful questions we now face. Some of the questions, for example, for the government, quoting from the statement of the Ateneo de Davao officials, sabi nila, why did we, again, take the path of guns and violence and covert secret action to solve any problem, when we had already chosen, when we already had agreed that we would take the path of negotiation, consultation, and trust to solve our problems? Why did we not respect what we agreed to in the implementing operational guidelines of the 1997 government MILF agreement on the general cessation of hostilities? And I quote, police and military actions shall continue to be undertaken by the government throughout Mindanao. In pursuit thereof, confrontational situations between the government and MILF shall be avoided by prior consultations between the parties. By prior consultation between the parties. There is a mechanism agreed upon by the government and the MILF in the year 2002. It is called the Ad Hoc Joint Action Group, or AJAG. This is composed of 8 members, 4 from the government, 4 from the MILF. The purpose of the AJAG is for a coordinating body for the operations by the AFP-PNP against criminals within areas controlled by the MILF. Why? Why did we not avail of this coordinating body called AJAG? Why did we violate this agreement between the government and the MILF? The Ateneo de Davao officials also state for accountability and state, and I quote, whoever bears the responsibility for the mission order to our men in uniform recklessly violated the agreement we had with the MILF. That person bears the responsibility for the carnage in Mindanao. That person derails us from the path of peace. And lastly, the Ateneo de Davao officials state, in God's name, bring that person to justice. Questions for the MILF. Why is the MILF giving sanctuary to terrorists in their areas? Assuming that we accept the statement of the MILF that the terrorists were harbored by the BIFF and not by them, the fact still remains that it was in their area. It is also a fact that members of the MILF and the BIFF are so interrelated. According to the statement of the Ateneo de Davao officials, and I quote, Mama Sapano was known to be a sensitive, volatile area where ideologies between the MNLF, MILF, and the BIFF are blurred and the bloodlines of families with histories of violence. This is known in Maguindanao, and this is known all over Mindanao. Quoting Solita Munsod in her column in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, she says, and more to the point, if the MILF and the BIFF were like family, why did the MILF even condone the BIFF's protection of the terrorist Marwan? Was this not bad faith on their part? Again, Mr. President, these questions strike at the very core of the peace process, which is trust, tiwala sa isa't isa. Finally, quoting from Randy David in his column, he says, perhaps the hardest question of all, and I quote Randy David, he says, if today wanted terrorists like Marwan and Usman, who have caused so many deaths with their bombs, can live undisturbed in MILF territory, what assurance do we have that they will not continue to do so more freely on autonomous Bangsamoro state? another question to the MILF is why did not the MILF authorities stop the carnage? Surely they must have surmised, according to Solita Muransod, it was an attack on them. It was not an attack on them, but rather an extraction operation. The staff commander is quoted as saying that in the early morning of the fighting, the joint monitoring team of the government and the MILF called for a ceasefire, but that the MILF and the BIFF fighters continued firing. This needs to be verified. Finally, Randy David in his column says, we need sobriety to be able to discuss these issues rationally. But we must also need to be told the truth to be able to find our way to justice. In this time of overwhelming gloom and anger over what happened, to ask for unwavering public support for the Bangsamoro Basic Law without offering answers is to court a strong negative reaction to its passage, unquote. Mr. President, let these and other similarly painful but essential questions be answered. And let us have these questions answered before a truth commission, where the wisdom and determination of the men and women who compose the commission shall suffice to trigger the compulsion of the conscience of those who hold the facts. The task of forming the Truth Commission is an urgent one. It must begin its work soonest. Let the work of uncovering the truth begin so that we can take the next steps towards rebuilding the badly damaged mutual trust. Today, 3 of our colleagues, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, have filed a bill forming the Truth Commission, the Mama Sapano Truth Commission, authored by Bam Aquino, Coco Pimentel, and yours truly. And I hope it will gather the support of everyone in the Senate. Muli, ang ating pakikiramay sa mga naulila ng ating mga bayani. Bilang pagpupugay sa ating mga bayani, hayaan ninyong ialay namin sa kanila ang paghahanap namin ng katotohanan sa pamamagitan ng isang malaya at iginagalang na Truth Commission. Ginoong Pangulo, ilalagay na sa huling hantungan ang ating mga bayani. Huwag nating payagang na malibing kasama nila ang katotohanan. Huwag natin payagang malibing na kasama nila ang pangarap natin para isang pangmatagalan at makatarungang kapayapaan sa Mindanao. Maraming salamat po.
Mr. President, the Minority Floor Leader, which is to...
The Minority Floor Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished gentleman from Mindanao answer a few questions for our enlightenment on the topic that he...
Most certainly, with pleasure, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to, in principle, agree with the sense of the speech, the privileged speech, Mr. President. But there are a number of questions hanging. Bago po yun, siyempre, gusto ko rin pong ipaalam ang aming pakikidalamhati sa mga naiwan at taulila ng mga ating kapulisan na nadamay dun sa nangyari sa Mindanao, sa Maguindanao. So, Mr. President, I distinctly remember having read somewhere that during the time of Julius Caesar, when soldiers are killed in battle, the government then, or the emperor, would give the soldiers' families a house. Binibigyan ng mga bahay nun eh. Hindi lang yung parang reward ng pamilya, binibigyan ng mga pabahay. If the government can give away houses to informal settlers, pag inililipat, bakit hindi natin maggawa ito dito sa mga pamilya nitong mga namatay at mga namatayan? Mr. President, do you think that should be something that the government should consider and take up?
Yes, most certainly. I'm in complete agreement with the suggestion of the minority floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, some time ago, during the scandal or fracas that happened in the National Bilibid prisons, the Department of Justice wanted or started to conduct an inquiry into what has happened there. At alam nyo naman ang nangyari doon. May mega shabu laboratory, may mga firearms, may mga expensive, luxurious equipments, not only for recordings, but also for parang tipong nightclub. And then, ang nag-iimbestiga sana ay DOJ. Hindi ko alam kung ano na nangyayari. During that time, I recommended that a truth commission be created, headed by Chief Justice Renato Puno, Senator Piampilo Lacson, former Congressman Baby Asistio. Yun yung mga nakakaalam ng pwedeng nangyari doon sa NBP. I did not hear any support from the members of the Senate during that time, but I suggested that, and it found itself in print. Do you think that should be done also, Mr. President?
Which one, Mr. President? The
Truth Commission in the National Bilibid prisons. You're having the Department of Justice investigate itself.
Yes, Mr.
So,
President. I think
ba?
that should be, yes.
Now, going to the suggestion, your suggestion that a Truth Commission be created now, as I said, in principle, okay, because we want to get to the bottom of things. And hopefully, during the hearings that will be conducted on Monday, I understand, by the Committee on Public Order, maraming pwedeng lumitaw dyan na maaring hindi ma-uncover basta-basta, no? But at this point, I am just a little worried, Mr. President, because I heard that will be a board of inquiry. I think they are about to start. Then the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the PNP is conducting or will be conducting their own investigation. And then the House of Representatives also will be conducting their investigation. The Senate will start on Monday. And the Commission on Human Rights also is going to conduct an investigation. What would be the effect of creating a Truth Commission on the 5 investigations that will be ongoing by the time that we pass this resolution? What do you think would be the effect, net effect, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, the hope is that we pass this with dispatch so that it can start immediately. As I said, I'm aware of the slowness of the legislative mill, so to speak. But if we all agree to move this together with dispatch and form and finalize the bill and make it into law, we can start immediately. Today, not only 3 senators have filed, 7 congressmen and the House of Representatives have also filed simultaneously their version of the bill, the same version that was being filed today.
So what would be the net effect on the 5 inquiries that are being started?
This will not stop the other 5 inquiries at all, Mr. President. But remember, the operative word here is independent. Independent from the legislative, from the judiciary, and from the executive. Totally independent, beholden, and answerable only to the people of the Philippines.
Okay. It
yes.
sounds good, Mr. President, but that will be the 6th. That will be the 6th body that will be inquiring. So what happens? I do not disagree. For the record, I'm just saying that I want to find out your reaction, because what if any of the 6 does not concur? The findings of the 6 investigations do not concur with each other.
That's why, Mr. President, this one is independent, no bias, not answerable, no political or personal agenda, and because we are calling for senior statesmen to be appointed, their credibility will speak for itself, so that their findings will have the credibility. The credibility of the person so appointed will be the weight of their authority, Mr. President.
Who will appoint, Mr. President?
It will be the President, Mr. President.
He is the same one who appointed the CHR, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President.
So the CHR is not an independent body? Or what do you think? Do you think?
Someone has to appoint. We also thought about that point, but someone has to appoint. If you look at all the commissions, historically, the Warren Commission of the United States and all other commissions, they've always been appointed by the President. It would be legally awkward for us to say, let's say, one to be appointed by the Speaker of the House, the other by the Senate President, the other by the Chief Justice. So, it is the President. But remember, the one that gives credibility to the Commission, ulitin ko po, the one that gives credibility to the Commission is not the appointing power, but the reputation, integrity of the person so appointed. What is crucial here then is that the person so appointed must be senior statesman, unimpeachable integrity.
Of
Mr.
course, Senator Gingona does not make any implication on the integrity and independence of the committee now in the Senate assigned to hear this matter.
I hope not,
Most
because-
certainly, Mr. President. Tinanong din ako niyan. But actually, what I said also is, mas maganda itong Truth Commission kasi one other factor is that it's focused. In the Senate, we're doing a lot of things.
I'm sorry.
In the Senate, we are doing a lot of things, Mr. President. We have a lot of hearings on various bills and everything. At least itong Truth Commission, focused na focused. That's also another factor in its plus.
What about the Board of Inquiry that is...
They can continue. They can
Are
continue,
they
especially
credible?
on police matters.
do you think they're credible also, Mr. President?
Well, let's not go into that, Mr. President. What I'm saying is the issues here
Well, no,
are so far-reaching. So it strikes at the very core of the Republic, especially what we're in the midst of crafting a bill that will give birth to a new autonomous region. And yet in that area, we have such an unfortunate incident with so many questions, so many painful questions that need the truth. Ang importante dito kasi, Mr. President, ang nangingibabaw ngayon, emotions. And emotions can only be overcome by facts after you ferret out the truth. If you do not bring out the truth, emotions will harden into perception and will harden into realities. That would be most unfortunate, Mr. President.
Well, we're in the same boat, Mr. President. We would like to get to the truth. We want it out. But I am just saying that for the record, I think you should place on record the fact that the same point that the Senate President mentioned, it does not mean that the other inquiries are not credible.
Yes, Mr. President, it does not mean that. And I never meant that. I never meant it that way, Mr. President.
Correct. So this is your idea is to have a truth commission to look into this also.
Yes, Mr. President.
The word also, because it doesn't stop the others. Because there will be things that will be available only to the Philippine National Police. There will be information that will be available only to the armed forces. Like, for example, why does a person like Marwan, who has committed a crime in Bali, Indonesia, have a warrant in the Philippines? What do you think, Mr. President? What is the answer to that?
I don't know, Mr. President.
You see, I see that the armed forces would know the reason, probably. But I don't know if the Truth Commission can get to the bottom of that, no? So credible din sila. Perhaps it will have its own things or idea of things on how to run it, Mr. President. So, well, again, I hope that does not diminish, or the proposal to create a Truth Commission does not diminish the credibility of the other investigating bodies that will be conducted or that will be conducting their own investigation into the matter. And then again, as I said earlier, kami po, ang aming mga pamilya, lahat po sa amin ay nakikidalamhati sa sinapit ng ating mga mahal na kababayan. Maraming salamat. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank
Mr.
you,
President,
Mr. President.
may we recognize Senator Honasan for a few questions as well?
Senator Honasan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, will the distinguished gentleman yield to some comments, a few questions, and entertain a motion?
Yes, Mr. President. The bill we filed, we certainly I would be very open for any suggestions, questions. But let me state that the bill we filed is not written in stone. It can be, we're welcome for changes. In fact, kaninang hapon, may isang senador na umakyat na sa opisina ko at nagsuggest na ng changes. Sabi ko, welcome yung suggestions po.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I agree that we honor the fallen 44 by remembering them and making sure that there is no recurrence of this incident. And of course, we also honor them by attending to the living. Yung death benefits, dahil nag-aaral ho yung mga bata, there are families to support, brothers and sisters, parents to support.
Yes, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, it is said that the first casualty of war is the truth. So I can surmise that the trajectory of the Truth Commission is to get a clearer picture of what happened in a very accurate manner, as accurate as we can manage within the given capabilities of the institutions. And Mr. President, I would like to ask if would you agree that this is not the first time that this has happened?
No, the incident, Imam Masapano?
Opo, yung may namamatay na sundalo, may namamatay na civilians, yung tinatawag ng na collateral damage. So ang impression ko po, Mr. President, is ang nagbago lamang yung mga petsa, the dates, and the personalities involved. Pero paulit-ulit po ito. And I agree that it's about time we institute the necessary remedial measures by legislation, if possible, that is within our the ambit of our job description, by some other mechanism that would prevent the recurrence of the same in our continuous search for peace, unity, reconciliation, and the elusive prosperity that Mindanao seems to be deprived of.
I'm in total agreement, Mr. President.
Okay. Mr. President, let me go to what I believe, for your consideration, is a reasonable starting point. Pag may incidents pong ganito, Mr. President, there is an after-encounter report, an after-operations report, an incident report, which emanates from the ground level, the operating units, Philippine National Police, Armed Forces of the Philippines, DILG, AFP, NICA, even, Mr. President, the barangays, the municipality has a journal that would reflect portions of what may have actually happened, which we have to piece together as a reasonable starting point where we can reconcile what is reported and what public statements we are witness to. Is that within the framework of the proposal to establish a Truth Commission?
Yes, Mr. President. That would be a good starting point, Mr. President.
Opo. Now, my next question is, do we have that now? Is the gentleman aware if all the reports... by the way, Mr. President, time is of the essence po dito, no? Because para ho itong scene of the crime, habang tumatagal, nasisira yung physical evidence, there is this tendency to reconcile at various levels the reports to make them consistent and credible for public consumption. That is one danger which we want to avoid.
Yes, Mr.
Opo.
President.
At sa dami ho ngayon ng, well, I can understand, no? Those who have had experience, we have now a surplus of experts on ground warfare, the peace process, but not to pass judgment on their opinions, no?
Yes, Mr. President.
So the first order of the day is a process that is mandated by law, by regulation, that all reports must be in as a starting point so that we can determine if indeed, before we decide on whether we will pursue the path of an independent, credible truth commission, we will have to determine if the existing mechanisms are sufficient, are adequate to cover, to address what we seek, which is the truth. Is that a reasonable proposition, Mr. President?
Yes, but like I said, Mr. President, there is already an existing mechanism, the ADJAG, which is an agreement between the government and the MILF in May 2002. Tagal na nun, 2002 pa. And from time to time, I understand, they have resorted to it. It provides for the coordinating body for when there are criminal operations against criminals syndicates inside the MILF areas, as well as the AFP. It was not followed, obviously, this
Opo.
time.
Well, this is my perspective, Mr. President. I think while the BBL is being hammered to completion, I understand, and this is what we have gathered in terms of information, that it was a simple case of the serving of warrants of arrest. That is why they used police units with what was supposed to be a very strong backup force from the armed forces. The procedural aspects of this, the coordination, is of course still subject to what we will gather from the information. Pero, Mr. President, my own 2 cents worth is hindi ho pwedeng ipaghalo muna rito because I assume that area is Philippine territory.
Yes, most definitely.
Yes. So, warrants of arrest. Yun lang ho, kailangan, well, procedurally, we cannot comment on that anymore until all inputs are in. But the point really is we must look at this as a plain and simple police operation to serve warrants of arrest that were applied for and approved and issued by competent judicial authority. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, at the start, yes. But also let me add that we must take everything into context, Mr. President, that this is not just an unfortunate incident. It happened at a time, as you said, Mr. President, at the time when both houses of Congress were hammering out the proposed BBL. And like I said, questions are raised, questions that strike at the very core principles of peace agreements, which is trust, tiwala sa isa't isa. So kailangan, right now, if you ask me to answer, I cannot answer. I will yield to my colleague's distinguished profession and his knowledge in these matters.
Mr. President, former profession.
I'm sorry. Former.
I have been rehabilitated, so I'm now...
But still, I yield to your, let's call it, former profession, and we respect your knowledge on these matters. But right now, all we have, really, all the people have are questions. Bakit? And all I'm saying is, kailangan ang sagot dito sa mga tanong na to, yung katotohanan. Napakadelikado ang kalagayan natin sapagkat panay emosyon ngayon. Ulitin ko po, panay emosyon ngayon. At kung hindi palitan itong emosyon ng katotohanan, mag-harden yung emotions into realities.
Thank you, Mr. President. In fact, Mr. President, I am happy that you are now arguing from the same perspective. Precisely the point of waiting until all information reflected in official reports are in while we deliberate, while we mull over what direction we should take. But having said that, Mr. President, while we seriously consider this, not forgetting that time is of the essence, may I now request the distinguished gentleman, with the permission of the Chamber, to entertain a motion to enter into the record, through the Secretary, the names of the 44 Special Action Force personnel who were involved in the Mamasapalo incident. This is just a simple way of honoring them in the annals of the Senate for posterity, for future generations, so that we will not repeat the same mistakes.
I am in full agreement, Mr. President.
I have the list here, but instead of reading them one by one in the record, I will submit this to Your Honor for transmittal to the Secretary with the permission of the Chamber.
You may wish to read them, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may I move that the list of the 44 casualties, the so-called fallen 44, be entered into the record for posterity and to honor them.
The Secretary is directed to enter into the records the name of the 44 fallen heroes of the SAF.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move that we refer Senator Gingona's speech and succeeding interpellations to the Committee on Public Order and secondarily to the Committee on Peace and Unification.
Sorry for it.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, February 3, 2015.
Session is adjourned until Tuesday, February 3, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.